Hello everyone. In today's video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I was recently reading an article that was discussing the fact that the classic thought that retractable airplanes, especially these little single-engine doohickeys here, are basically, the wave of the future. But now we have some other options out there which are actually very, very, very high efficiency, but they don't actually have retracting gear. So what I thought we would do is we do a little bit of experimenting between the Cirrus SR-22, which is a fixed landing gear airplane, very, very quick. It's powered by the Continental 550. And we're also going to take a look at the Beechcraft Bonanza, which is retractable and also powered by the Continental IO 550. Let's go ahead and get started. So what we're interested in here is we're interested in seeing, does it really make that much of a difference? So we're lovely out here in Provincetown. I'm going to go ahead and do a pretty standard takeoff for our aircraft here. Again, these are very, very big engines. These are not little little tiny Lycomings or something like that powering your Cessna 152. These are big 300 horsepower fire-breathing engines, and we're a little teeny tiny aircraft here. All right, that looks pretty good to me. Go ahead and give it a nice little tug, and we are gone. Now, the first thing we always notice with these kind of aircraft with this kind of power amount is just how incredibly steep of a cabin angle we can get here. So we're at 84 knots, which is perfectly fine. Obviously, our normal VY is going to be a little bit, we can see it's a little higher there. The nice advantage to that VY is it's going to give us a lot lower cabin angle. But you're noticing this thing is just going up like a rocket. So I'm going to go ahead and push the nose down just a little bit here. I'm going to pick up enough speed to get to our VY. And you can see we're still hovering at about 6 or 7 degrees here, so the performance without retracting our landing gear is actually surprisingly good. Go ahead and hold the nose down just a little bit more here. Come on, this thing just wants to climb. There we go. Very nice. So now the next thing we're going to be interested in here is what we've got for performance. So we've got about 100 knots VY. That's getting us about 1,000 feet per minute. That is incredibly impressive. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our turn here, and now we're going to skip time a little bit, and we're going to get ourselves into a nice little cruise in the general direction at about 8,500 feet to get just an idea of what this is going to be like. All right, find ourselves up at altitude now. This is pretty good. So we've got ourselves quite a bit of feet here, about 8,500 of them as a matter of fact. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what everything we've got. So first of all, again, we're just interested in performance, apples to apples here. So we're looking over on this side, we can see we're at indicated 158. We've got a true airspeed of about 180 knots here, pretty standard, nothing too chaotic here. This is really where we're interested, however. We see that right now we're at 75% power. For those of you who are curious, I did take the time to go ahead and lean out the mixture and get everything like that. I noticed that if I was waiting for my cylinder temperature to come down, it scared me for a minute there. We're getting about 16 gallons per hour as far as our fuel economy. For those of you who do the math real quickly, that gives us almost exactly 5 hours of endurance, which again, keep in mind the two planes we're going to be comparing are a little bit different from that. The key thing though, like we said, we're curious about here is the fact that our true airspeed is about 180, and we're interested to see that we're getting about 16 gallons per hour for 75% power. That's actually really, really, really good, like impressive, almost better than some aircraft that are similar to it. Again, the advantages of modern fuel injection and the way that they chose to model this. Of course, now that this is all set and everything's squared away, the real question here is, what about the complexity of flying it through the traffic pattern? All right, so what we're going to be interested in here is a bunch of different things. So the first thing, of course, we're going to be curious about is just how easy it is procedurally to operate this particular aircraft, as far as safety concern and how much of a landing we can really put this thing through. So what we're going to do is we're going to fly the traffic pattern, pretty much standard, nothing doing too crazy here, but we're going to potentially, of course, do a carrier landing with it. And what we're interested to see here is just how durable those little metal legs in the bottom of this thing actually are. Now, when I say carrier landing, a lot of people are like, what do you mean by that? Just you wait. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So far, this flight's been very, very simple. Again, the only real difference we've been dealing with this whole time is the fact that our wheels have been hanging out the bottom the whole time, as opposed to something that we have to retract or we have to, put back down or anything along those lines. Whoop, we're going to give myself a little bit of power here. This thing is very, very sinky. One of the things I do not care for with these kind of aircraft is that even at speeds like 100, if we have no flaps down whatsoever, I have to hold the nose up very significantly in order to keep it happy in the traffic pattern here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pull back the power a little bit. And notice we're looking at about 105, 106. We want to get a little bit slower so I can pop that first click on flaps in there to help us out. There we go. Very nice. Okay, so now we're going to continue our approach here. Get that lovely good old runway down there, our runway 5, looking pretty good. One of the interesting things I've been dealing with lately is noise abatement procedures, but that will be a video for another day, and I will share those with you. All right, let's go ahead and pull the nose down. We're going to let it start to sink. So now I'm going to put both notches of flaps in right away here. This seems very, very scandalous, but for this particular airplane, because everything happens so quickly, it's just a little bit easier to kind of get it done early and just kind of keep an eye on our speed as we make our approach here. So again, we're looking for that lovely 45-degree angle, and there it is. And we're going to go ahead and apply a little bit of power here. About 80 knots is a pretty good speed for this one. Now, one thing I don't have to do here is I do not have to put my landing gear down. I know that sounds like, oh, so? Come on, man. Real airplanes have landing gear. All right, we'll go ahead and roll ourselves out of the turn here and line ourselves up. We're pretty good here. Actually, we're a little high, but nothing I haven't millions and millions of times accidentally done before. All right, go ahead and let that nose come down. We're going to reduce our power. Nice tight turn. The disadvantage of the sim is that I cannot stick my head down. And we're right on speed there. Little RPM there. Looks pretty good. And we're right on altitude. We're right on speed. Now remember, we're going to be doing a carrier landing this time. So a carrier landing, the word they use is firm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut the throttle. And I'm going to hold the nose up at a 4.5 degrees. About right here. And we're just going to hold it right there. Just hold it right there. Hold it right there. It's going to be the carrier landing. Here we go. Carrier landing. Here we go. That was actually a really good landing. That was not supposed to be that smooth. All right. So now, of course, I don't have to worry about tapping the landing gear lever or anything like that. The approach was fine. There was no issues with drag, no issues with control. Everything in general worked really, really well for that. So I'm actually very, very pleased. So, okay, we've got a pretty good idea. Keep those numbers in the back of your head. Keep everything we've seen so far. And let's go take a look at the competitor. Oh, yeah, here we go. It's even got my number on the side this time. So this one is the Beechcraft Bonanza. This is a slightly bigger airplane. Now, this is definitely a wider airplane, so keep in mind that some of the numbers are not going to align with each other. But the reason I chose this as our competitor to the Cirrus 22 is because it's got the retractable landing gear, and it has the exact same engine as the Cirrus 22. So we're going to be very, very interested to kind of see the similarities in performances and handling here. So climbing on board, again, this is a Bonanza. I've got room. I can put my feet down on the floor. I don't have to put my feet out. This is no Mooney. You'll also notice in the back seat is I have an extra set of seats. So again, we're dealing at a different scale airplane, and I want to make sure everybody is aware of that. But we also want to see what the difference in that real size is going to do to us. So I'm going to go ahead and do a standard takeoff here. Nothing too aggressive here. One thing I do like about the Bonanzas, though, is that they are quick planes. Once you get them going, they go. There's a very, very, very little resistance here. All right, so we're rolling down the runway. Rotate coming up in a second. I love how easy it is to get the nose off the ground with a Bonanza. It's just such a sensitive airplane. All right, we are airborne. We're going to look out the window. We're going to get the landing gear out of the way. There's our first difference. Is that, like I said, we are a retractable airplane. We're going to get a little bit of altitude here. We've got about 90 knots. We're going to bring up that click of flaps. Delightful. We're climbing up real simply there. Nothing too crazy so far. Again, it's a Bonanza. These are fantastic airplanes. They're very, very easy to fly. I find that the only thing that you kind of got to watch out for with Bonanzas is that when you do take off, you just have to kind of be just be careful. It's sensitive. It's a very, very, very almost twitchy plane for the uninitiated is what I like to call. All right, so the next problem we're going to have to deal with, and again, this is not a Bonanza problem. This is just common, is we have to reduce our RPM a little bit there because during our climb here, we don't really want to be working the engine too hard. Another complication, of course, too, is we have our cowl flaps, which I've already adjusted, so you can see they're pretty much in the right position there. I'm not too worried about those. It's nothing too crazy here. Again, easy stuff. Whoa! Hate it when that happens. There we go. Just want to open this up a little bit. Careful what buttons you push. So we're just going to continue our gentle climb here, and what we're going to do is exactly the same operation that we did with the other aircraft there. Notice, by the way, that our VY is almost exactly the same as it was on the Cirrus. I'm just going to kind of swing this one a little bit, and I'm going to let everybody kind of cruise upwards. We'll go ahead and catch you once we get up to our 8,500 feet. All right, so we've got ourselves some altitude, and we're ready to take a look at the numbers. All right, so first things first, getting the power exactly the same as it was over in the Cirrus is a little tricky. Again, we're not comparing as far as FADEC. FADEC is a wonderful, amazing tool, and I think it's absolutely great. But you notice we have basically the exact same settings as we had before. One thing I noticed is even though both engines are exactly identical, you'll notice I'm using another 2.5 gallons per hour here for the purposes of actually consumption here. So that's actually kind of interesting, and I don't know how I feel about that because, again, this is taking a look at the simulators, looking at the people who modeled it. There's a lot of variables involved, obviously. But I just find that very, very fascinating that that makes that much of a difference. And again, leaning this thing, oh, you can see how far back that red handle is right now. It's quite a process. So taking a look on this side of things, of course, you can see that our speed is very, very, very similar to the other aircraft. We're only a few knots, about 7 or 8 knots difference for the same power, but 2 gallons per hour increased fuel consumption. Now, the reason I really, really find this interesting is because you got to have to remember that this aircraft actually has retractable landing gear, which makes it go ahead and has a little bit less drag. But the reality is, and when you start looking back here, is the fact that we are a wider airplane. Not only are we a wider airplane, but we're longer. And because we're also a little bit heavier, not as heavier as you think, because of all this extra drag that we're creating here, is that we actually need more lift for the purposes of the same amount of airplane here. So one of the things that they were doing, and this is one of the things that the article made a very strong point of, was the fact that even though these aircraft are very powerful, because of their increased size over to their smaller cousins with non-retractable gears, they end up with almost equal performance. And of course, some people have really taken advantage of things. If you want to look up something amazing, look up the Columbia 400 or the Cessna TTX as an example of how ridiculous you can go with a non-retracting aircraft. So, of course, we're not interested in here just to talk about that. We're also interested in seeing what it looks like down in the traffic pattern and see if things are that much more complicated. All right, let's take a look. All right, let's go ahead and start slowing down. Now, one of the first problems I always have with a high-performance aircraft, and when I got endorsed in a high-performance aircraft, this was the first thing that surprised me, was how much effort it can take to slow the aircraft down. Now, our Cirrus there, even though it had those little tiny legs kind of poking out the bottom, it actually was able to slow down relatively smoothly because it did have a little bit extra parasitic drag here. Now, this aircraft, we don't have any parasitic drag. When our wheels are actually retracted, it takes a significantly long time to decelerate, which is one of the reasons I kept my cruise speed up so high into the last possible second here. So what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves set up for a nice little left traffic pattern here, just like we did earlier. And we're going to just fly it through basically the standard way that we do it. So we're about 1,000 feet there. That's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and level myself off. I'm going to bring that nose up. Now, one advantage the Bonanza has here is that it's a much higher flap speed before we start getting ourselves into trouble, as I like to kind of call it. Let's go ahead and get everything back to normal. We're right about at our pattern altitude. I can't get over how huge the dashboard is on this thing. It's it's a little much. All right, got to make sure my mixture is set correctly. My mixture is set correctly. Nice. And you'll notice the same problem we had with the Cirrus. We actually have a very high nose angle in order to maintain a safe pattern speed. One of the jokes my buddy makes, and I started making too, because he's not wrong, is the fact that Cirrus pilots, or especially high-performance pilots, like to do straight-in approaches because of the incredible amount of speed they have to carry inside of a traffic pattern. So now if I was a little Cessna 152, this would be a vacation. I mean, I could be doing 55 knots right now if I wanted to. But the reality is this aircraft really, really, really wants to fly. And I think I'm up at, what, 4 or 5 degrees here? Yeah, about 5 degrees. That's incredible. I'm actually going to pop a notch of flaps there. All right, the notch of flaps helped a little bit. Good. All right, there's our position. We're going to go ahead and reduce power. And now we have a new problem. Landing gear. Let's go ahead and slap that landing gear handle down. In the real world, when you pop the landing gear, they're very quick. But the downside with the landing gear, of course, is your plane goes like this. Or in the case of a Mooney, it goes like that. Again, depends what aircraft you're flying for that particular day. That's a technical term, the sound, by the way. All right, so we're going to continue down. We're going to set ourselves up for the 45. Again, we go real fast here. Go ahead and take that left turn. Pop that next notch of flaps in. Generally, I don't recommend flapping when you're turning. There's some very expensive houses down there. I kind of want to rev up my engine really loud. No, those people need to sleep too. All right, let's go ahead and make our turn here. And we're going to just kind of finish it just like that. Looks pretty good to me. And go pop out a couple extra RPM here. That looks like a pretty good speed. We're a little slow, but nothing too bad here. All right, we're right on glide slope this time. We're going to do a carrier-style landing. So we're going to hold 5 degrees until the plane hits the ground. Oh! Careful, careful. That's how you crash. All right, let's go ahead and stick my head up just a tiny bit higher here. Oh, I can't. There we go. Cool. All right, so there's our lovely runway here. I'll make sure we're on speed. Going to do my compass checks. You really can't forget to put those landing gear down. And that looks pretty good. We're just a little high. Well, not really. We're actually pretty good here. All right, so it's about 80 knots. I'm going to go ahead and pull the power all the way out. And we're going to go ahead and lift the nose up to about 5 degrees. Yeah, about right there. And we're going to wait. Ooh! Ouch! So the thing I think everybody noticed there is that when I did that with the Cirrus, I landed right here. with the back wheels. You'll notice when I did that with the Bonanza that I landed all the way over here because the aircraft had so much more drag because, surprise, these are not streamlined, unlike our good friend the Cirrus. So interestingly enough, the aircraft is spectacular when the wheels are retracted, but the moment that you deploy them, I feel like I popped a tire. Whew, that was rough. You notice as soon as they went down that our drag went up so much, it actually caused some new problems. Now keep in mind, and I'm saying this is not an apples to apples comparison because we were dealing with a different amount of induced drag, but it's just another one of those little things that people don't realize. So what are my conclusions? My conclusions are this: that if you're looking for something that is very, very, very high performance, you have to consider multiple aspects to the performance problem. If you're looking for something that's going to have speed plus the ability to carry a lot, you're probably going to be looking at the Bonanza just on account of the fact that they can trade off that penalty because they have that retractable landing gear. Now, if you're looking for something that's just fast and is good general aviation aircraft, having the fixed landing gear really wasn't that big of a penalty. It actually worked out to be, 10, 15 knots. Now, you're probably saying, wait a minute, this is a VL3. This is not the aircraft that you were just operating a second ago. It isn't. And the reason I'm pulling this out is I just want to demonstrate my point even more aggressively here. This aircraft right now is climbing at 2,350 feet per minute on less horsepower and less fuel than everything else we flew. Right now, let's see here. I'll take a look. Woo, I'm getting bounced around a little bit. Nothing new there. Let's see here. We're burning 7.1 gallons per hour at maximum fuel consumption. I'm full power right now, and I'm producing almost about a third of the climb fuel consumption of that other aircraft. Now, of course, you're all going to sit there and say, hey, wait a minute, buddy, you're cheating a little bit because there's no back seat. Yeah, you're right. There is no back seat. But when it comes to that extreme performance, if it is something that you really, really, really need, having the retractable landing gear and having a small body is the ultimate combination if you desire to have nothing but pure performance. Now, to give you an idea of how ridiculous this thing is, let's get a little bit of altitude here. There we go. So we're at that 8,500 feet again, cruising along, no problem. I'm actually over-revving the engine. I have to actually back up the RPM a little bit to reduce the power. This is a little Rotax engine. Believe it or not, this is not like a Lycoming 360 or anything like that. I feel like people put Lycoming 360s in cars, I swear. Go ahead and tweak the mixture just a little bit to try to get a little tiny bit more performance out of it. And look at that. We're getting 110 indicated. I'm going to go ahead and trim this out a little bit. This thing's a little bit tricky to trim. Let's see here. We have a endurance of about, let's call it 3.5 hours. And it looks like we're burning 6.7 gallons per hour. Ground speed, of course, right now would probably be about 120, probably 125, 130. Actually, I can just look. What do we got here? 129. So we're actually moving pretty quick for not burning a lot of fuel. So like I was saying earlier, you just have to balance the needs of anything. It's not to say one is better than the other. It just really says, what do you need in an airplane? And that should be determining exactly what you should prefer. Now, of course, you're probably saying, what would your general preference be? If you could own a plane, which one would you rather have, the Cirrus or would you rather have the Bonanza? For me, I would prefer the Bonanza. Now you're saying, oh, it's because of the wheels. No, it's because it holds more people than the Cirrus can hold. And a lot of times my mission involves traveling with a lot of people at one time, pretty long distances. Now, if you want to read something interesting, look up this aircraft called the Cherokee 6. I think you'll find it to be almost the perfect plane for myself. Enjoy.